With that, I'd like to introduce Matt Tiffany. Matt is a farmer from Redwood Falls, and I'm sure many of you know Matt, but he's going to give you a wonderful presentation about their operation. So please help me welcome Matt.
All right, thank you, Holly. Like you said, my name is Matt Tiffany. I farm with my father, Bruce, down just outside of Redwood Falls. We run about a little over 2,000 acres that he and I work together. We've got one employee and another part-time guy who's sitting back there. But so we've used cover crops, strip till, and no-till. And really, when I preface how we got into this, it was solely on, does it make financial sense? I liked the idea of, doing my part to be an environmental steward, but it's got to pay its own way. And that's really why we got into this was, can this make me more money? So that's kind of what I'm going to talk about, how we got to where we're at, and some of the dollars. You're going to see my real numbers. Some people don't like showing their real numbers. I don't really care. I've got good relations with my landlords, so if you want to come try to steal it, go for it. I'm fairly open, and I go ahead and ask questions as we're going here. Just throw your hand up, and I'll answer questions. So, doesn't make sense. Mainly, why we got started is we had to have a why, and that's the same thing with cover crops, strip till, no till. Why do you want to do it? You've got to have a why. And for me, if you can just look at the picture that explains my why, is we were seeing way too much soil movement. And 3 of those pictures are spring pictures of soil movement. So the 2 bottom ones, the bottom left one over here, that's a May day. That's an April day. So too much soil was moving. That was my why. You can read some of the others there. Another one that I think we need to be quite mindful now with how our political climate is that bottom one right here, the public perception of agriculture. And if we as farmers and business people don't do our part and to show our part, the public is going to make us change. And that's my opinion. I don't like people telling me what to do. So if I can be a little more progressive, make some changes, so when somebody drives by, they're forming an opinion and they say, that farmer, he's doing a good job. I like that. It's more of a positive message from farming instead of looking at road ditches that look like that. So talking about erosion, this is a soil test that a friend of mine in southern Minnesota took from a road ditch drift. And if you look at that, pull that out. If you look at that, you can break down some of the P levels and nutrient contents over here. And let's put some real world dollars to this. So from these levels, that gives us this many pounds of P. That's 500 pounds of DAP. Let's put it times the price of fertilizer that I paid last fall for DAP. There's our real dollars in the nutrients that were from that erosion dirt. So that's pretty costly. Comes down to over $1,000 an acre. Now, obviously, you're not going to lose a whole acre foot of soil, but over time you will. There's real money to that. And if there's something we can do about that, maybe we should. So we got started in cover crops 2014. There's a lot of things that didn't go right. We used to grow sweet corn, so I planted some oats before the sweet corn, late planted sweet corn, and that allowed us to cover that soil until we planted sweet corn in June. I did not want to see my soil blowing away like I did in 2012. So that was what got me started, and we started with the cover crops. The sweet corn and canning crops in general give a really good opportunity for silage to get a cover crop established, just because we would harvest that Del Monte would harvest that sweet corn in August or September, and there's still some good growing season left to get a cover established. So we went simple after the sweet corn with cereal rye and usually a radish or a rapeseed mix. And we've been playing around with some covers after soybeans. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. And really moving toward getting rye before all of our soybeans. And we'll talk about kind of the financial part of that. We also grow cereal rye that we harvest, and I've got a seed cleaner that I clean that seed and sell it as a cover crop seed. I think some of you in here have bought from me. We've got 350 acres of rye ready for next year. So again, giving us a window to get a good cover crop established with the timing of that. I mentioned about the soybeans. We're a little bit unique in what we do with our soybeans. I know there's some other parent seed growers in here as well. We grow parent seed soybeans for Bayer. All of our seed soybeans are for Bayer. We have a lot of variables. When you try to compare things and break it down, we grow what's called the 1X stuff. So we will plant on our farm maturities that range from 00, so very early 00 for southern Saskatchewan, all the way to about a 1.7 to a 1.8 maturity. Last year we had 184 different varieties. We started planting May 16th and we finished June 23rd. Those June 23rds were 1.7 maturities. They don't yield very well when you plant them June 23rd. That's a field of 1X that we have. All those different colors are different bean varieties. So that's in, let's say 119 acres of planted. 40 some different varieties are in there. So bottom line, it's really hard for us to compare practices when we have so many soybean variables, because as you know, a 00 is going to yield different than a 1.9. But we do have some larger acre fields that we have made some comparisons on. 2018, 2017, this was a sweet corn field. Part of it was. We had 55 acres in there. So we had some that was a cover crop, and then we had some right next to it that wasn't a cover crop. So this region, we use Climate Field View, which makes it actually really easy to pull out data. We can create a region in there, or we can name it a different hybrid or a variety or whatever, and it helps us pull out the data so we can quickly look at it. Of course, data is only as good as the time you take to calibrate and do all of that. So good data in, good data out, bad data in, bad data out. We do a lot of calibrating this. Every day our combine gets calibrated against the grain cart, which is calibrated against a load. So if I'm going to use it, I want to make sure I have good numbers. Anyway, this region here with sweet corn, harvested in early September. We did our normal cover crop, which was a rye and a rapeseed, and probably a radish or a turnip in there. And this up here did not have cover. This did not have cover. Within, up here we had an RM2317 soybean variety, no cover. Over here, within this region, there's that RM2317 with cover. Nothing else different. Planted the same day, covered, no cover. Where we had the cover, we were 8.83 bushels bed. That was in 2018. Down here, we had this soybean variety, RM1917, no cover. Within this region where we had the cover, we still had some of that too, 55.11, 0.82 bushels better. So in 2018, in that field where we had some big enough numbers to actually compare, both cases, we saw a yield increase where we had the rye. And the nice thing with Field View, what you can do is if you look down in here, you can break this down by soil type, you can break it down by topography, you can break it down by all sorts of different metrics within that. And what we saw, if I go back, On this one, where we saw our biggest yield difference was on our highest slope. So these hilltops up here is where our beans had the biggest yield difference. So you get thinking, 2018, we had 10.5 inches of rain in July. So we had a bunch of drowned out areas. But why did those hilltops yield more? It has got me thinking, and especially where we had the cover crops. And I guess my thought process and whatnot is just in 1 year, we didn't do any tillage after, and we no-tilled into the cover crop. Having that root structure of a rye did a nice job of holding that water on the hilltop instead of rushing off down to the bottom here and contributing to our pond. I think we'll see that too as we keep going on this presentation. So let's put some dollars to it. This is just kind of a rough weed control seedbed prep time. So with those different regions, how would you quantify some of this? So where we didn't have the cover crop, I think in 2018, we were still running a chisel plow and that stuff in the fall. What are we doing for weeds? Like I said, we plant some of these late. Sometimes we were having to work the field twice just because, if you're waiting until June to get your seed, what are you doing to control weeds? And at that time, you'll work it and then you'll get a flush and then you'll work it again. So this is kind of the no cover with our tillage. All of these numbers add up down to here. If you decide, hey, I'm going to work this once and I'm going to use a Roundup pass just to control some weeds, that number's here. And what we did in the rye is here. So you can see the differences there. We no-tilled into the rye, standing green. That was the first year we had done that. So that was also a learning thing. But we put some numbers to it, and this is what it costs. We cut out our pre-emerge herbicide just because that rye outcompetes everything early, and we didn't feel we needed it. So when we looked at the end, we put the yields that we had to that. So we had the no cover region up here with tillage and with herbicide, just a little different cost on this column. And we had the rye this is for the 8.8 bushel difference. You can see our total income over here. Now this does not include rent. This doesn't include any of that. That's all variable and you guys all have different numbers than I do. But it showed where the rye was versus these. We made $110 an acre more. I'll keep doing that. If we look out here, comparison 2, where we had 0.82, we made $38 more. So, and that's accommodating and accounting for the seed cost, the Roundup, all of that stuff. Talked a little bit about corn, getting into corn with covers. This is a little more challenging and has proven to be a little harder to figure out. Strip till, I like the strip till with covers because we have a nice dark strip, but then we get the cover in the middle. And I really like that option. Getting your covers established after beans can be a challenge if you're going a full season bean. Do you have much growing season to get anything established? With the rye, I think you do, just because it will germinate down to that 35, 34 degrees, and then you'll see it in the spring. So 2019, we're back to that same field. 2019 was a terrible wet spring. These areas never got planted because it was too wet. They have more tile now, but they didn't get planted. It was a wet spring, but we're back to that same region. This is the region that had the rye. This is the region that didn't have rye. Same with here. So we're comparing corn. So after 2018 soybeans, we strip tilled, treated the field, all the same, and planted corn. So we'd switched to a 96-day hybrid. In the no rye, we're at 184. Over here in this region, where we had the rye, we're at 208. We treated nothing different on that field. It was strip tilled, but we still had those regions from that I created in field view. We saw a 24 bushel difference. Same hybrid planted the same day, where we had the rye, where we didn't. And again, 2019 was also wet. You break it down by your slopes and your topography. This was a hill right up here. You can see the dark green and it's a lighter green. And I think we gained a lot of that yield on those hilltops, even on a wet year. And I really feel it's because we kept that water from running off of our soil and contributing. We had ponds in too, contributing to down here. So that was the good year. 2020, we had some strips of cover, and I was checking to see, okay, when can I terminate this cover and not hurt myself? I just had 48 row blocks. They weren't very big, and I only did it on one time. I'm not a research analyst here, a scientist. Strip till with the covers. This was the hybrid. With the covers went 216, with no cover went 214, and where I terminated it late, so at post-emergence spraying time, so that corn was probably somewhere up in this range, we lost about 11 bushels. Okay, I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to spray it right after I plant, or terminate that rye right after we plant. So that was the only comparison I had with covers in 2020. 2021, and you see a lot of writing on there because there are a lot of things that didn't go very well. All right, I liked what I saw in 2020 as far as with covers and strips, so let's get into some no-till with covers with strips. The no-till with covers had a very significant yield difference. Part of that, and a big part of that, is if you know anything about these hybrids I used, 5465 and 10207 really struggle with emergence. In that, I wouldn't say cold germ, but they're not the fastest out of the ground. I didn't have very good words with my seed dealers because I told them what I was doing, and they said, "Oh, these are your best ones." I know it's possible to get. This hybrid, strip till with cover there, strip till with no cover, we're a little better. No till with cover, 159, no till with no cover, 170. And again, I'm not doing this on hundreds of acres. This is in one field, 10 acres each probably in these different treatments. 10207, we saw a very similar thing, except I didn't have it with no cover. But the no-till with cover hurt me considerably in both. This was another field of my dad, farther down, and we saw a similar thing: strip till with cover, strip till with no cover, no till with cover, no till with no cover. And I think the big take-home message of that is, if you're going to be using corn in cover crops, especially in a minimum tillage or a no-till thing, which is not a lot of people doing that, you need to make sure you're looking at that emergence and how does that corn get out of the ground. Because in 2021, it was a cool spring, and those hybrids were the wrong choice for us to handle that. I look down here, and planting date was a big thing too. I look down here, this hybrid 5554 planted into green rye, went 182, and that was actually my third highest cornfield on our farm. Oh, we planted it later. It's a different hybrid. It was very different. So it can work. You just got to make sure you're doing your due diligence on selecting your hybrids. That's what I have on that. We'll get into more no-till corn here as we go. But with the covers, it is a struggle. and it has cost me some money, not a huge amount of money, but managing your nitrogen up front, growing a rye and a corn crop, that gets hard to pencil out in my thing right now. So proceed with caution. Strip till, we started strip tilling the fall of 17. I was looking at this in 16 with the idea that this makes sense if I follow University of Minnesota recs. I can reduce my nitrogen or my fertilizer use by banding it. I can make one pass with a strip till rig in the fall and I'm done, and then I plant. And my grandfather had been doing all of our tillage. In 2018, let's see, he would have been 90. He's not going to be around forever. It was also in my thought that how do I manage the workload if I don't have that person? So how do we do this? Timeliness, efficiency, and solely economics. Is this going to make me more money? Nobody, I didn't know Dean strip tilled at this time. I would have talked to him, but I went out to North Dakota to a deal that they had there with the U of M, NDSU had a nice partnership. Went to a field day out there, talked to a lot of farmers up in Wapaton area, and I figured, you know what, if these guys can make it work, why can't I make it work? So, okay, who's gonna make some strips for me? And I didn't know of anybody that had time or a machine, so I bought one, bought it affordable out in Michigan, and got it trucked home. So what that looks like, we vari-rate 2 dry products in the fall. We can make one pass in the fall, we plant in the spring. I don't freshen the strips. It costs me about 0.58 gallons of fuel per acre, and I'm covering just under 25 acres an hour. I'm ready to plant. So I like that idea. Here's what I've got. It's a Flexicoil twin bin, Nifty A P40 unit. We pull it with that tractor. We run it all with our Trimble, and I get my RTK with min cords and a N-Trip app and Bluetooth it in and all of that stuff. So that's what we're using for strip till. I like it. It's a little more aggressive than I like. We've got a big 2-inch point down here, which I'd rather have something flexible and adjustable. So in a dry year, I would run maybe a bigger point. In a wet year, run a smaller point, because in a wet year, which we had in 18 and 19 stripping, that pulls up a lot of really big wet lumps. And this is now your seed bed that you're making. So now you have this really lumpy strip, which is good and bad. It's good for stopping erosion in that strip because those lumps can slow down the water if you have some hills. But now you still have these lumps in the spring that you've got to manage. And that would maybe be your idea for a freshening pass. I run my row cleaners a little more aggressive on our planter just to manage these lumps and stuff like that. But that's what we have for strip till equipment. People talk about, oh, you can't buy a strip till, it's so expensive, and yada, yada, yada. All right, so let's look at some numbers. So I went on Tractor House and just found different stuff. All of this stuff is from the Kibble Tractor House site, and it's model years here. So I didn't put a tractor in there because you're going to need a tractor for both of them. That's some equipment costs for conventional tillage equipment, strip till equipment. I really don't like the conversation point of, oh, you can't strip till, it's so expensive. Well, so is all of this stuff. And if you're using a 4-wheel drive tractor, or in our case, a larger front wheel assist, you can do the same work with this and that tractor as you can with this and that tractor. So I bought a 24-ton fertilizer tender for 20 grand last year, so I know that that's an actual number too. The 2018, first year we strip till. Wet spring, it really wasn't very fun, but what we saw was where we had our strips, And you're all familiar with the lime green tillage tractor strips across your corn. Looks terrible. Working wet soil. In 2018, most of our fields were conventional tillage. We had all of those tillage pass strips, but not where we had strip till. We didn't have very many fields done because we were just trying this. But in that strip till in July, that corn looked really good. It wasn't uneven. It was all even. It all looked good. We didn't plant in any wheel tracks because we didn't drive on it in the spring. We drive between the strips, planting there. So it looked really good in July. And I asked my dad, because he wasn't 100%, yeah, let's go strip till. He was, why don't you try it and I'll watch. And I was fine with that. Maybe I was arrogant and overconfident, but I thought, I'm going to try it. So by July, I asked him, what are your plans for this fall? What are we going to do for tillage and all of that? And he looked at me in the shop and said, well, aren't we going to strip till? I'm going to. That was before we had seen any yield data. So just the way that crop looked in 2018 gave us some confidence that, yeah, this is looking like it's going to work. So when we get to yield data and we look at all of these fields, and like everybody else, there's a huge range of yields. This is our highest yielding. We look at planted acres, 66.8. We harvested 62. That field sits very nicely. It's well drained. It's well pattern tiled. So in 2018, when we had 10.5 inches of rain on July 3rd, that field hardly had any ground just because of the way it sits. Our next highest yielding, the South U, is 199 acres. We harvested 79. It was 20%. Really, 20% of our whole crop in 18 was drawn out. But we saw that strip till field was our second highest. And then we walked down that way. So right there, our two strip tilled fields are in the top third of all of our yields in 2018. So this is looking good. Let's do it again. So and like I said, in 2019, we just were strip tilling everything. So hard to compare when everything's strip tilled. Can't make any comparisons to that. 2018, I also started doing some no-till. This was not to, hey, I'm going to no-till. I gained some new land. They were in a 3-year EQIP contract, and 2018 was their 3rd year, and they asked if I would no-till. Otherwise, they would have to pay back in with penalty, I'm sure, part of that EQIP contract. And I've gotten a new planter with Delta Force and the Precision Goodies. And I thought, all right. So we adjusted the rent because this is new to me. We made it more of a flex rent thing with some yield goals. And I did no-till corn on corn. Probably wouldn't do that again the way I did it in 2018, but we learned a lot. So that's how I got started in no-till. And that was some learning there. Obviously, we all kind of understand some of that benefits of no-till, improving our structure, reducing our cost by not having all of those passes that we have to pay for. Makes a difference with $5 fuel versus $3 fuel or whatnot. And what we found is those fields that we've been no-tilling have had similar yields as our strip till. So let's look some more at this. And this is actually where I have the most data. How do we fertilize that, right? And my opinion is our nutrients need to be in the root zone, which I was getting with the strip till. So how do I get those nutrients in the root zone, but without the tillage aspect? So the first year, I don't have any pictures on this on my prototype, but it was a crude cultivator bar with some planter mounted single disc openers. They'd get maybe 2 inches down, and that would go on the back of my Flexicoil. Didn't get deep enough. I didn't like it. Let's find something better. Bought this thing down in Nebraska a couple of years ago. 21, I bought it. It's really overbuilt 40-foot bar with these Yetter Magnum units, and we can band our nutrients in that. Most of it this last fall was in that 4 to 4.5 inches deep. Cuts a slot. You can see here there's really very little disturbance. It just cuts a slot, flows the fertilizer, closes it down. Really like this. This talks a little bit about how fast we can go. And that strip till I was using 0.58 gallons of fuel. Here I'm using 0.32, pulling it with that same tractor that pulls my strip till bar. At 35 acres an hour and 4.5 tons of fertilizer in a twin bin Monte, Mike's got to be kind of Johnny on the spot with our fertilizer because you go through it really quick. So, it shifts that management and it shifts that workload a little bit. So you still need a person and all of that, but you're changing that type of person. I don't need a steering wheel holder to sit there and turn around doing tillage. I need somebody that can manage and look at that, the nutrient management part and understand that where we're banding this fertilizer, that's going to be where we're planting. So you're thinking ahead that we're going to make this fertilizer pass, how we're going to plant it and all of that stuff. So it is a shift in your workload and who you have doing it. Planter, we run white planters. We've got 2 of them. Both of them have Delta Force Clean Sweep. I don't have speed tube. We run box planters for what we do with soybeans because oftentimes we may have 2 or 3 different soybean varieties in one 12-row planter. So you can't do that with a center fill. So I want to have a planter that can do whatever I need. We run row cleaners on that, and then we dribble 0x2 blend of a 32 and ATS out the back. That's variable rated based on the sulfur requirements, which is based on the soil organic matter. And then we side dress a lot of the balance of our nitrogen, and that, of course, is variable rated as well to offset this variable rate and the variable rate of all the stuff in the fall. So a lot of technology. It's not that hard with the right operating, and that's where I talk about that shift between a steering wheel holder in conventional tillage, which is that, and the management level. We run a solid cast on one side and a spoked on the other side for our closing wheels. And I think when you look at the no-till part, especially in that corn, closing the seed trench is by far your most important thing. The downforce is really good, and if you're going to add anything to a planter, this hydraulic downforce, in my opinion, is your best bang for your buck. Whether it's conventional tillage or no-till, I can look at my planter map on this, and I can put it on downforce, and I will see tillage tracks from the fall before. If that grain cart cut kitty corner across the field, I'll see that on my monitor because those rows took more down pressure. So I know it's adjusting for that spring down pressure isn't going to be. So the hydraulic down pressure is by far worth its money. And then paying attention and making sure you're closing your furrow. This is strips with cover. You can see we're planting in a nice clean strip, but we have the cover in the middle, and obviously this is no-till with cover. So 2020, let's look at the dollars between these different practices. These are my real numbers. I have one field new in 2019 for me, and it was conventional tillage. I think this 2020 was the first year I had it. He had ripped his bean ground. Lifted his disc up and ripped the bean ground, and it was black. So here's some numbers. I use Iowa custom farm rates because everybody has some different ideas on how much the tillage passes cost, but they all do cost money. So I use that just because it's a set thing. Here you got all your conventional tillage costs, does not include, rent or a harvest expense. Strip till, no till. These are my costs upfront, my fertilizer costs, all of that stuff. Talked about, strip till and no till. We are putting on an 80% rate because the university says if it's banded, I can reduce my fertilizer because of the better placement. And okay, so I'm going to do it. Conventional fertilizer is 100%, or the conventional till was 100% nutrient removal rate, and we're at 80% of that in our banded options. So those are my costs in 2020. Let's look at our results. So our conventional till 2020 was a pretty good year for most people. That field went 223. Corn was 375 then. Gross revenue, expenses, income. You could follow through there. Our strip till really yielded the same. And that's what we had seen in 2018 when we made that decision. We're going to go to the strip till because we're right in the ballpark with everything else. And if I can do it more efficiently, I put more money in my pocket. So we saw it here in 2020 again. And this is all of the strip till fields. Average was 223 in our price. And there. Our no-till, we actually yielded better in our no-till field. Now this was 2020 was the 5th year that field had been in no-till. I only had one cornfield that year in that no-till, and it was the no-till corn on corn. That wasn't very good. In fact, it was about half of that. But we went 227 that year on that field. So when you break out the dollars and you look at the advantage, we saw our no-till over conventional made me $63 an acre more. Now, these are not all the same hybrids, and I know there's a lot of variables in that, but this is what I had for comparing those practices. If I remember right, this was 102-day corn, and my no-till was 94-day corn. And some people are going to say that early corn is going to cost you yield. I chose that because, it's no-till. Something's going to be first, something's going to be last. This baby being a little cooler, I may be going to put an earlier maturity hybrid on that just to offset some of those environmental parts. So 2020's looked good. 2022, I have the same fields and corn. Let's use it again, and I like to use that one field. I kept it in a conventional system solely for comparing, because it cost me money last time, but if I'm going to make any real decisions on this, let's keep that field in conventional. There's our expenses again. Let's see, 323, 282. Yeah, expenses went up from 2020 to 2022. One thing somebody pointed out was our planting cost is $1 higher an acre. I mentioned in 2020 when I said he had ripped that bean ground, that took more power to plant that soft, mellow soil just to motivate the tractor and pull that planter. It took a lot more power. And here we had it too. Now fuel prices weren't the same in 2020 as 2022. So it did cost me more to plant in a conventional tillage system than in a no-till strip till, where you're driving on a firm soil. That strip hasn't been worked. That no-till obviously hasn't been worked. Planting did cost me more money in that soft, soil. It just as a planter had to work harder, or the tractor had to work harder to plant that crop. So there's our expenses, pretty much all the same thing as 2020. 2022, let's look at our yields. 2022 was a dry year, we remember that. We were about 10 to 12 inches short of average moisture where we were in 2022. So let's look at our yields. Our conventional till, we didn't have any drownouts. Actually has a really big basin, used to be a slough. 195, 375. I don't know why I used that, because that should have been more money. Maybe that isn't even the right number. Oh, 675. I just didn't change it up on top. 675 a bushel. There's our revenue. There's our expenses. Here's our ending. So on a dry year, here's the differences. Our strip till yielded 39 or 40 bushels or dollars an acre better than our conventional. Our no-till over our strip till was $91, and our no-till over our conventional till was almost $131 better. We're seeing a trend here. My no-till is out yielding my strip till, and my strip till is out yielding my conventional till, which I knew that back in 18 and 19. So why aren't we doing more no-till? Is what's popping in my head. And when we looked at all of our fields and all of our acres, and we looked at it and thought, some are higher. You get a field just the way it's laid out, or the hybrid you put on there, that the strip till maybe out yielded the no-till, and that's fine. But what we saw is this trend, and we saw it in 21 as well. I didn't put 21 numbers up here because I didn't have that comparison with the conventional tillage all in there, because we only have one field. So all of our corn for 2023 is no-till. We looked at the numbers, we looked at the data. It's looking like this is working. I can pull that thing at 35 acres an hour and 0.32 gallons of fuel. I can cut my fertility rate and I can grow the same. We're going to no-till. So 1,100 acres of corn next year is all going to be no-till for us. Not a lot with cover, because we saw the numbers on that the covers is something we're still trying to figure out. But the dollars that pointed us towards this no-till can work with the right equipment and with the right, attention to detail. We've let the numbers decide where we're going. A few other things. People talk about temperature and stuff. So our FFA program has these little LabQuest 2 things. That's a moisture probe or a temp probe, and this is the other. But they have a moisture probe and a temp probe, so I thought, this will be kind of fun. Let's run around with this thing and see where there's differences in different tillage practices. And this is, again, not a replicated study. This is just a guy running around on his Ranger looking at stuff. It was really hot. It was about 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and it was really hot that day. This was June of 21. Didn't rain much. So these are the different practices that I went around in, and some of them weren't my fields. So I didn't ask the neighbor, but just ran in there, and you can look at those differences in temperature and moisture, and to see that the differences are pretty significant. I've got a video on the next slide that kind of shows the difference between this field and this field. They're right across from each other. And if you look at this, we've got a very large difference in those. And this is the ditch in between them, where the brome is obviously taking moisture. It's a growing crop. We also see that down here in our rye field, where it was a growing crop, was some of our lowest moisture, just because that's an actively growing crop. If these will work. So we'll start with it's June 8th, 2021. I'm on the soybean field that we BT'd our corn stalks and seeded a cereal rice cover crop. You can see there's a bunch of residue on the surface, but also quite a bit of soil. I'm using a LabQuest 2 little monitor here. I've got a soil temp probe and a moisture sensor as well. And right now at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it's currently 97 degrees out. I'm showing a soil temperature of 81.4 degrees Fahrenheit and a soil moisture of somewhere right around 21 to 22% moisture. Corn stalks. All right, still June 8th, 2021. Behind a cloud now. I'm across the road. That's where I was last time in the VT cover crop field. Across the road in the neighbor's moldboard plowed field, and as you can see, there's not much residue. Same sensors. If we look at it, surface temp or soil temp 93, available soil moisture 6.8%. So, right across the road, we see the difference there. And if I go back to that, I don't know. Let me go back. Now if I go there. All right, we've got a lot of residue, and I don't know why those rotate when you plant, because on my computer it played fine. You got a lot of residue. You're shading the soil. You're protecting that. Our beans are smaller because I'll guarantee you I planted them 2 to 3 weeks later, just because that's when the seed showed up. No residue. I don't see any weeds. You start seeing these little weeds poking up. He doesn't have the moisture. His weeds are taking the moisture. He worked it twice in the spring. I don't know why. I don't know how his yield is, but he did complain about that farm never yields good beans. So he can do what he wants, but there was some very significant difference when you look at the moisture and the temperature here. 21 to 6.8, and he's got weeds growing using some of that moisture. So just one day observation out there doing things. I think they've used some of my soil samples and stuff for infiltration tests and the rainfall simulators. And if you've never seen a rainfall simulator, that thing's pretty cool. And just to see how the soil or the water moves through the different soils, that's pretty cool. So I guess to kind of try to wrap it up, some of our cover crop key points. You got your cover crops, and it's hard to stick some dollars to some of this stuff. How do we know that the cover crops were the sole reason that made me more money? I think the big thing for me, the rye, it outcompetes our early weeds. I can cut out my pre-emerge herbicide for our soybeans. And like we saw in the past one, where I've had the beans in the rye, it has yielded more for me. So when you couple the saved expense, and in all of our cases, the rye beans yield better. That puts some real dollars. The covers in the corn for us hasn't proven to be very profitable yet. We're working on that. Like I said, the cover crops have never had a negative. That's been challenging. This is when we were tiling. We own our own tile plow and we do our own drainage in tiling. So that's one of the start holes of our tile holes. So, you look at all of those roots in the top 2 feet, those are working for us. We've seen rye roots down 36 inches in 5 weeks. That's a really quick growth for that rye to get down there. So I know it's doing work for us. If you want to get into the wildlife thing, we've got duck eggs out there in our no-till corn stalks that we drove around, just trying to do our part and covering those soils. Strip till, I think, is a really nice program, especially if you're moving from the conventional tillage. Don't want to go as far as no-till, or maybe you don't have the drainage or you don't have the soil structure yet. The strip till, in my opinion, was a really good way for us to work and learn towards that no-till. Had I not been forced into no-till in 2018, I'd be strip till. I wouldn't have even tried the no-till. It increased our profitability. We've seen our yields stay the same. We can cover ground faster and be more efficient with the same dollar and not change anything. And you get some of the environmental benefits. So I really like the strip till. For us, the no-till, like I said, has proven that, hey, we're yielding the same as our strip-till, but we're doing that with even fewer dollars. So this is more efficient for us. So that's the way we're going. That was my 2018 corn on corn. Looked great. Road cleaners did great. We ran out of nitrogen because I didn't side dress it because it was too wet. And what I know now with no-till versus the strip till, or I should say the conventional till, that soil is very different. It's firm. It carries a load. We learned this at harvest of 2018 where we were loading on the road in our conventional tillage fields because you were sinking in and you were making a mess. You couldn't get a truck in the field. We go to this field and you didn't sink in anything. You drove the combine in. 6 minutes? All right. One last thing. You didn't sink in anything. So you didn't have to worry about it. We loaded the truck in the field. The tires were wet because that soil was saturated and the water would squish out, but you didn't sink in. So what I know now is in 2018, I probably could have side dressed that with some Y drops and not gotten stuck in the middle of the section because that's what was happening to everybody trying to Y drop around us is they were having to go out with the tractor and pull out the high boy. So what I know now is that soil is very different and it has been the most profitable system on our farm. Let's see if this one will work. And this one really drove home the difference in that soil. And it's probably going to switch around on me. Little preface, 3rd year of no-till for this field. They had gone the full whole hog. They had been organic. They went to conventional. Then they went, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to fence it in. We're going to graze it. We're going to cover crop. And we're not tilling it. This year, 2018, was the 3rd year that I farmed that. So, hey, here I am in a long-term no-till field, southwest Minnesota, after all the rain we've had. A few observations. One, the soil is fully saturated, as you can see. It is very firm, not squishy, but it is holding that water, and if you listen, you can hear it squish out as I walk, leaving no footprint whatsoever. Ranger tracks, not even settling in, yet this soil is fully saturated. So that was I think it was a Wednesday actually. I don't know why I remember Wednesday, but it was a Wednesday, and I drove the Ranger around, and it was pretty interesting how that soil was very different than the rest of our soil and the neighbor's soil. The neighbor was conventional tillage, beat guy, and had done all of his normal conventional tillage stuff. I'm right across the fence. I know it's the same soil type in that basin. There's one tile line that comes out. I have water standing. He's got water standing. Told my dad, we got to see this. It's pretty neat. Come on down. So we went back the next day, and my pond was gone. My above ground water was gone. He had a pond still. And I thought, that's interesting. The difference is here. This is the 3rd year. So when we talk about cover crops and we talk about no-till and we talk about all of that stuff, putting some dollar figures to it, I think you think about this. If we can hold the water on our hilltops and not have it run to the bottom, I'm keeping more water on the hill. I have less of a drown out potential down there. That gives me some more crop. On a dry year, I can hold more water on the hilltop. I can hold more water in the low spot. That's a benefit to me. So it's combining them all, I think, is part of it that makes it more valuable. One little saying, little girls at Halloween, they're bigger now. And questions?
So I like those predictions you did, that you're going to all no-tills or
So the question was, we had conventional till, strip till, no till. In 2020, 2022, and I didn't have conventional tillage in 21 for corn. Am I gonna keep doing that and continue? I don't think so. I think what we've seen is the numbers, and it says, we're doing no-till for now. Now, that may bite us. I still have my strip till bar. I still have the caddy that pulls that. I still have all of that. We don't have any conventional tillage equipment. That's all been sold because we're not using it. So, I don't think I'm gonna go back to the conventional tillage. That landowner, I wouldn't say disagreed with the whole what I was doing. They just said that's not how we would do it. But you're renting it, you do what you want. So that's been kind of fun to see them watch it and change. So I'm probably done comparing because I don't know. I'll probably strip till. I do some custom strip for a neighbor. So I'll have that no-till strip till, but it's not apples to apples. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Pounds of rye for a cover. The guy selling it or the guy using it? The guy selling it says, you know, if you're flying it on or if you're broadcasting, probably about that bushel. We use about 2/3 or 3/4 of a bushel because I really think if you can get it established, that's probably enough. So in that, 35 to 40 pounds. Talking about cover crops, I don't play the government program games. Some of them were tied together with, you got to have 4 species, you got to have all of this. I want to do what I want, and I want to do it how I want to do it. So I don't do that. But to answer your question, probably that 3/4 of a bushel, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Can you address the weed control?
Okay, so the weed control between the different practices or with the cover crop?
Yes.
All right, so the weed control with the covers, we find, especially in the soybeans, we don't need a pre-emerge herbicide because we have outcompeted all of our early weeds, especially those winter annuals and those things. So we can save some money there. Now you got to burn that down, or if you wait long enough, you can roller crimp it. I've waited till it's headed out, but that wasn't by choice. That was by the weather made me. That's a different challenge too. The no-till weeds, and as you go from the tillage to a conventional or a minimum tillage, you will see a weed species shift. You're going to see more of these winter annuals, your mare's tails. You're going to see a lot more dandelions. And depending on what you have for thistle pressure to begin, you're going to start seeing a little more of that. So there is a definite weed shift to more of these no-till weeds, I guess you could call them. Mare's tail especially being one of them that we've seen a lot more of. We've gone to a fall spray. So after our early soybeans, and that's why the rye works very well with us, because we get our early soybeans harvested last year we started the 7th of September. We get our beans harvested early. We spray 2,4-D. We wait 5-7 days. We plant our rye. So that fall spray really gets us ahead of those winter annuals, and especially the dandelions. Those first couple of years, they were just dandelions. So there is the definite weed shift that you're going to now have to manage chemically versus with the tillage. I don't know if that answers your question.
You see a decrease in weeds?
Yes. So, and I think part of that is our rotation with that small grain as well. That rye that outcompetes, we didn't have 2 feet of snow, that stuff would be greening up here in a couple of weeks. It gets going. By not burying our weed seed, we do see a very different flush per se of weeds. The large seeded weeds are giant ragweeds. I inherited a very diverse mix of weeds with those fields that had been organic, with cockleburrs and curly dock and all sorts of weird stuff. Those large seeded weeds sitting on the surface are decaying, they're not germinating, and we're getting ahead of them just because they're rotting on the surface instead of having a chance to germinate. So we do see less weed pressure on even the water hemps and those small seeded broadleaves too, by not burying that weed seed. One more? Two more? One more?
Keeping them for break, so it's kind of their fault.
Ah. Okay, well, I'll be around. As you see, I don't mind talking about this, and I've got all sorts of pictures and stuff we can look at, other stuff. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
did have one question. Fine presentation. Did you have any video of when you went to the field with your side-by-side?
So the dark one, I didn't drive around in this field. I walked in. Yeah, the moldboard plowed one was obviously the neighbor's field, and I had another corn one that I didn't show the video, but it was walking across the fence line.
There's a lot of mud under it. There's a lot of mud under it.
Yeah. Well, and there wasn't much mud that day because it hadn't rained and it was hot and
I'm
dry.
talking about that one.
Yeah, I didn't walk in theirs because I would have been up to about here. It was very different. So just observing, and that's planted into the headed out stuff. Lots of residue. So, any more? Ready for break?
Still roll your soybean ground?
Good question. Do I still roll the soybean ground? I have a love-hate relationship with rolling. The no-till corn, we still roll them, and part of that is because of what we do with Bayer for soybeans. They have to, NCIA inspects that, and they don't like walking through no-till corn stalks. They really don't like walking through drilled beans with no-till corn stalks. So I roll it just to kind of provide a benefit for them. There's no root balls, and I get it, and I talked to them about that, but they still wanted it rolled. The rye, I compared with tall rye, and I really don't like 4-foot headed out rye. Just for the goals of some of my goals of why I want that rye. I always roll my rye. So I'll terminate it. And I've tried terminating it with a smooth roller. I don't like that. It doesn't work. This picture, that stuff was headed out rye, and I left some just standing just to see what happened. So it was about 5 acres. And that was one of our larger acre fields, so it was all one variety. And where I had rolled it or terminated it, maybe 3-4 days later when it was browning up and rolled it, those beans yielded 5 bushel better than the chunk where I had left it tall and just let it naturally fall down. Those beans got real tall and spindly as they were reaching for that soil or that sunlight, and they did yield less. So when you ask about rolling, I'm a proponent of, in a tall cover, terminating it chemically and then rolling it flat. And I do the corn stalks. I hate it because then they can blow away and all of that stuff. But more as a request of Bayer for their inspectors. I don't know that you'd have to. All right.